Show me this. You've just finished dinner. The plates are cleared, the kitchen is quiet, and for once you actually have a small pocket of free time. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe 40. You look at your shoes by the door and you think, why not? So you lace up, step outside, and start walking at a pace that feels completely comfortable. No burning lungs, no drenched shirt, no feeling like you're about to collapse. Just you, the cool air, and the steady rhythm of your own footsteps hitting the pavement. And because nothing about it feels dramatic or difficult, most people naturally assume that the difference between a 20-minute walk and a 40-minute walk is pretty straightforward. A little more distance, a few more calories, maybe a slightly longer playlist. Nothing that really changes the game in any fundamental way. But what if that assumption, the one that almost everyone makes without even questioning it, is actually costing you the very results you're working toward? Here's the question that almost nobody thinks to ask. If you could somehow freeze time right at the 20-minute mark and look inside your body, not at your legs, not at your lungs, but specifically at the fat wrapped around your organs, the fat deep in your belly that no amount of crunches ever seems to touch, would it look like a system that had fully received your message? Or would it still be sitting there, quiet and cautious, waiting for more information before it decided whether letting go was actually safe? That question is not hypothetical. It is not poetic. It is exactly what metabolic researchers and clinicians have been working to understand for years. And the answer they've uncovered doesn't just change how you think about walking, it changes how you understand your own body, why it holds on, why it lets go, and what it's actually listening for when you move. Most people think about fat loss the way they think about filling a gas tank in reverse. You move, you burn fuel. The tank empties a little. So naturally, 20 minutes should burn a certain amount and 40 minutes should burn double, with the biological effect scaling neatly and proportionally the whole way through. That mental model feels logical. It feels clean. The problem is that your body, and visceral fat in particular, doesn't work that way at all. Visceral fat, the kind that wraps around your liver, your intestines, your kidneys, and your other vital organs, doesn't behave like a passive fuel reserve quietly waiting to be tapped. It behaves more like a security system, a sophisticated, deeply sensitive security system that is constantly scanning its environment, reading incoming signals, and making calculated decisions about whether releasing stored energy is the right move or whether holding on tighter is the smarter strategy. And that distinction between fat as a passive tank and fat as an active decision maker is everything. Visceral fat is not just sitting there doing nothing. It is one of the most metabolically active tissues in your entire body. It is hormonally wired, stress responsive, and deeply connected to your body's ancient survival programming. It sits close to your vital organs not by accident, but because it evolved to respond quickly to signals of danger, blood sugar instability, and circulating threat hormones. Because of that positioning and that deep wiring, visceral fat is far more reluctant to release its stored energy than the softer fat you might notice just beneath the surface of your skin. It doesn't react to a single burst of effort the way a muscle would. It waits, it monitors, it looks for patterns. It's asking one central question over and over again. Is this movement a temporary blip? Or is this a real, sustained, trustworthy signal that energy is genuinely needed? This is exactly why two people can commit to walking every single morning for months and end up with completely different outcomes. The first person keeps their sessions right around 20 minutes because that's what fits between dropping the kids off and starting work, and after a couple of months, their waistline looks basically the same. The second person stretches their walks to 40 minutes, doesn't walk any faster, doesn't change a single thing about what they eat, and slowly, over those same months, starts to notice their belly softening, their clothes fitting differently, something shifting. not because they burned dramatically more calories during those extra 20 minutes, but because their body finally received a signal that was sustained long enough and consistent enough to change what was happening on the inside. As that nervous system shift takes hold, something important happens in your blood sugar regulation as well. Muscles begin taking up glucose more efficiently during sustained movement, which reduces the demand for high levels of insulin to manage blood sugar. Instead of spiking and then crashing, blood sugar starts to stabilize into a steadier, more predictable pattern. And that stability matters enormously to visceral fat, because insulin is one of the primary hormones that tells fat cells to hold on and store rather than release. When insulin becomes more steady and more appropriate, the grip on stored energy loosens just a little. The conditions that keep visceral fat locked begin to weaken, slowly, gradually, but in a way that compounds meaningfully over time. By the time you approach the 20-minute mark, real, measurable progress has been made inside your body. Your circulation has genuinely improved, vascular resistance has dropped, nervous system tone has shifted away from alert and toward calm. For your mood, your blood pressure, your energy levels, and your general health, 20 minutes of walking delivers authentic, valuable benefit. But for visceral fat specifically, this is still a transitional phase. Think of it like knocking on a door. You've knocked. The person inside has heard you. They've even walked over and put their hand on the doorknob. But the door isn't open yet. The system has improved its internal environment and softened its signals, but it has not yet committed to releasing deep stored energy. For many people, especially those carrying chronic stress, irregular sleep patterns, or long hours of sitting, cortisol may still be elevated enough to keep visceral fat cautious and hesitant. At 20 minutes, your body is essentially saying, "I hear you, I'm paying attention, but I'm not completely convinced yet." The environment has improved, the signals are better, but the message hasn't been sustained long enough to feel fully trustworthy. The internal negotiation is still open. The security system has received your request, but hasn't yet decided to disarm. And then something fundamental changes when you keep walking past that point. Crossing the 20-minute mark and continuing steadily toward 40 minutes shifts the entire nature of that internal conversation. This is where your body stops evaluating the situation and starts actually adapting to it. The difference is enormous. One is temporary assessment, the other is genuine biological commitment. Blood flow has now remained elevated long enough for hormonal patterns to shift more decisively and more durably. Cortisol, which tends to hover when the body perceives uncertainty, begins to actually decline rather than rebound. Insulin signaling grows steadier and more reliable. The message your body is now receiving isn't the message of temporary effort, it's the message of controlled, sustained, predictable demand. And that precise distinction between temporary and sustained, between uncertain and predictable, is exactly what visceral fat has been waiting to receive. As you move through the 30-minute range and approach 40 minutes, your body has now spent enough uninterrupted time in a low-stress, well-regulated state to begin genuinely changing its priorities. The environment no longer feels uncertain or threatening. It feels stable. It feels safe. And in that safety, something beautiful happens. Fat cells surrounding your organs begin releasing fatty acids more freely into your circulation, not in a dramatic surge that you'll consciously feel, not in some sudden moment where everything changes, but in a quiet, meaningful physiological shift in how your body is choosing to source its fuel. The transition from relying primarily on circulating glucose toward drawing from deeper stored energy happens not because you forced it or pushed through pain or depleted yourself, but because you stayed long enough and moved calmly enough for your body to trust the signal you were sending. You weren't demanding, you were convincing. And that's a fundamentally different relationship with your own biology. This is the core difference between 20 minutes and 40. One duration starts the conversation, the other one finishes it. One introduces the idea that energy is being used, the other confirms that it is genuinely safe to keep using it. Visceral fat responds to that distinction so powerfully because it was built through millions of years. There are also specific windows in your day when a 40-minute walk becomes dramatically more powerful than at other times. Windows that most people walk right past without ever realizing the opportunity they're missing. One of the most significant is the period immediately following a meal. When you eat, your blood sugar rises and your pancreas releases insulin to shuttle that incoming sugar into your cells for energy or storage. From your body's perspective, this post-meal window is a storage-oriented moment. Energy has arrived and the system is pointed toward holding it. Visceral fat interprets this hormonal environment as a clear signal to stay protected and locked. And if you sit down after eating, which most of us do, you're essentially reinforcing that storage signal over and over again, day after day, meal after meal, without ever giving your body a reason to shift direction. A 20-minute walk after eating interrupts that storage pattern meaningfully. It redirects blood flow toward working muscles, encourages glucose uptake without requiring as much insulin response, and blunts the sharp peak of blood sugar that follows a meal. That is genuinely valuable. But for many people, particularly those dealing with insulin resistance or chronic stress, a shorter window may only partially shift the dynamic. It interrupts the storage signal without fully replacing it with something different. A 40-minute walk after a meal extends that interruption into a true physiological transition. Insulin has enough time to settle and normalize. Muscles continue using the incoming fuel steadily and efficiently. Blood vessels remain open and flowing. The body moves out of its storage orientation and into a state of genuine metabolic balance. And when that pattern is repeated consistently over weeks and months, it changes how frequently and how deeply visceral fat is reinforced as your body's default energy reserve. The same powerful logic applies after stress. When your nervous system registers a threat, whether that's a tense meeting, a difficult phone call, a frustrating commute, or just the low-grade, ever-present pressure that so many people carry around as their baseline, cortisol rises and sends a clear message to your body. Keep energy close, particularly around the vital organs. Sitting still while stressed allows that cortisol signal to linger, to deepen, and to recirculate in ways that keep visceral fat firmly locked. A short walk takes the edge off. It genuinely helps, but a longer, steady walk gives your nervous system enough uninterrupted time to fully step down from alert mode. Cortisol falls more completely and more meaningfully. The body receives a clear, unambiguous signal that the threat has passed and the environment is safe again. The internal state doesn't just pause, it actually resets. This is why people consistently report that longer walks feel qualitatively different after a hard day. Not just physically different, but different in a way that's hard to put words to. Less like checking a box on a to-do list, and more like genuinely returning to yourself. That feeling is not just psychological. It is not just your mind deciding to feel better. It is physiological. The system has had enough sustained, uninterrupted time to actually change its state, to lower its chemical alarm, to shift its hormonal profile in a way that shorter movement simply cannot fully accomplish. You feel it because it's real, and when you feel it regularly enough, when your body learns to associate that 40-minute rhythm with safety and restoration, the entire relationship between your stress response and your fat storage begins to shift. Over weeks and months, these patterns accumulate into something you can see and measure. Clinicians who work with metabolic health don't just look at the number on the scale, they look at waist circumference because that's where visceral fat lives. They look at fasting insulin levels because those reveal how the body is managing blood sugar over time. They look at blood pressure trends, inflammatory markers, resting heart rate, how people feel after a difficult night of sleep, how quickly they recover from exertion. And the people who show the most consistent improvement across all of those markers are very often not the ones doing the most intense workouts. They are the ones who have built a consistent habit of sustained, calm daily movement. They are the